Well, welcome back to the Pastor Pod, a new podcast for pastors and leaders. Man, we're so glad you're joining us. I'm Josh here with my good friend Jay up in Boston, Massachusetts. How's it going up there, buddy?
Man, I can only tell you that fall has definitely arrived. I'm sitting here in a hoodie. I've been in a hoodie all day. It's 48 degrees when I got up, and it's only going down from here. Love it. Getting ready to fire up the fireplace in a couple weeks, I'm sure, and it's going to be a blast. A little bit different than down there in Florida, right?
Yeah, man, we had a morning where it was 69 degrees. We were super excited. I mean, we were posting on social media. My kids were outside, shivering. We're having a great time, man. It's been a great week. We had a great beach baptism last Sunday, just a great
Whoop, whoop.
celebration as a church. And
There was a
little,
special baptism there, right?
yeah,
Come
man,
on, I got
Hannah
to
was
interrupt you.
baptized. I was a mess. I wore sunglasses so nobody would really know how much I cried. But man, I tell you, so many just stories, people just coming to faith and celebrating through that moment. And the weather was awesome. And it was just the most picturesque day. If you don't know a lot about Southwest Florida, I mean, there's the sunsets are awesome, but literally there's the sun was going down, and on the other side it rains here like crazy. There's
Hmm.
rain clouds coming, but there was a double rainbow on the other side. So it was literally like God was just showing off. But
Look at
uh, but,
that.
but more than anything, just she was so ecstatic to go public with her faith, and just so encouraged by that. But it was awesome, man. Celebration was so great. We ate food, we sang,
Yep.
everybody hung out at the beach. So just a good Florida day.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Did you know that there's like 15 things a day that we're supposed to celebrate on social media nowadays?
So I noticed this trend, and I'm glad you brought it up because I feel I like to be a part. I have a little bit of FOMO, so I like to be a part of things. And I'm like, okay, I missed that one. I missed that one. I'm like, wait, what is happening right now? It was National Daughters Day, then National Sons Day. I think you sent me a text earlier. Isn't National Podcast Day?
Yeah, it's
There's
September 30th.
right. So that was that's happening, and then I think National Custodial Day is coming up.
I'm really excited about that one.
Right. I think it coincides with National Fried Scallop Day. I think it's on the same
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I'd
Um,
like to submit some days. I don't know how you submit days, but
so I actually looked at this. This is there's a website, nationaltoday.com, right? Is that what it is? Yeah.
yeah, that's it. Yep.
This website is I'm going, look, we need to be celebrating on October 4th, National Cinnamon Roll Day. Who doesn't
Absolutely.
need to celebrate that, right?
I'm all in.
I mean, it's National Cinnamon Roll Day, and then for lunch you can celebrate National Taco Day because it's the same day.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and actually September 30th is National Love People Day. So
Oh, there you go.
so I mean, that's good stuff. Actually, today while we're recording, it's National Coffee Day. Can I get an amen?
All right, there you
And
go.
National Starbucks Day. Uh,
It's today.
it's today
Oh, I didn't
apparently.
even
Yeah,
know.
yeah. It's SimChat Pora Day. It's VFW Day and World Heart Day.
Wow.
So make sure you get all those pictures posted on social media today.
If you
Yesterday, yesterday was National Good Neighbor Day and Ask a Stupid Question Day. So just to make sure.
Bro, I don't know how you keep up with this. If you did, I mean, is there a hashtag for all these? I really want to look at this. This is fantastic.
Probably.
I think I'm going to spend a
Yeah.
week. How about this? I'm going to spend a week trying to figure out how to really get on Instagram for everything for that week. Let's see what happens. People probably think I'm crazy. You think people
Please
think I'm
do it.
crazy? They would be like,
Please
"What
do
are
it.
you doing?" I'm like, "I'm just following the trend." Hashtag trend.
Just
Anyhow,
trying to be cool, man.
no, we're making fun, but I did notice that. I was like, I can't keep up. What is happening right now? So you're supposed to celebrate a lot of things, apparently, that I'm not celebrating. But please know, podcast world, I do love my family, my son
Yes.
and my daughters and everything.
Absolutely.
I did not get to Instagram though. I can't keep up. I can't keep up. And I want to keep up. So, but listen, I think that's just the nature of where we're heading in the world, Josh. I really do think. I think people think more is better, bigger is
Hmm.
better. And I kind of get it because my family acts that way. My family acts that way. Our motto, our family motto literally is go big or go home. That's our family motto. My wife, it drives her crazy. So we'll throw a barbecue and we'll invite a few people, and before we know it, there's 60 people in my house. Like, that's how I operate. I was like,
That's
do you
right.
just want to invite everybody? Do you just want to put it on social media? Here's my address. Come to my house. Because I do. It gets out of hand really quick. And that rolls over into all sorts of like, parts of my life. And so
Yeah.
I think we're just in, that's the kind of world we're in. And it really
Hmm.
does kind of relate to what we're talking about today, huh?
Yeah, we're
Because,
talking about it. How do we deal with the tension between is bigger better, right? Whether that
right.
relates to church, leadership, life. And so we want to talk about that today. And we've got a few questions we're going to also answer that were submitted about this question.
Right. And I'm excited about this. And so, Josh, so why do you even think? So, I mean, all jokes aside, so family's better. I mean, in my family, we always say bigger is better. So, all jokes aside, why do you think? Why do you think there's this belief that bigger is better, always better? Like it's always bigger, better kind of concept. Why do you think that?
I think as Americans, I mean, it's kind of built into the DNA, right? You want to go bigger, you want to go better. As a pastor, I think there's a desire in all of us to make a big impact on the world. We want to see, people's lives change. We want to see as many people come to know Jesus as possible because people need Jesus, right? They need hope, they need help. And so for me personally, one of my biggest dreams is just make as big of an impact as possible on the people that God brings in my life. So whether that's through my church, through my family, like you, I mean, whether we have people over too, it ends up being more than we planned. If we plan a birthday party, everyone's invited.
That's right.
It's because you just want to make an impact. And but when it comes to church ministry, like the different churches in different cities and different areas, or even internationally, how God's working in all different ways, it's easy, I think, for us in the States to look at a facility or a platform, or we compare ourselves and we say, big is wrong or small is wrong or medium or medium's just right, and so
Mhm.
it becomes dangerous for us as pastors and leaders when we tie our identity or our worth to outward signs of success, when we think that's really what makes us important or that we're even valuable at all. And so that's something that I've struggled with many times. I know we've talked about this, and one of the questions that was submitted was kind of this question: what matters more, filling the seats of a church with more people, or filling the hearts of the people with Jesus, even if it means less attendees?
Mm.
And I think that's a good question, right? I mean,
Great question. Great
we
question.
we've all heard that as pastors, right? We heard people say, "Well, I don't like to go to a big church because there's too many people and I can't get connected." Or we go to a small church where we know everybody, but they're not maybe not reaching anyone. And so there's a tension there, and uh, I think it's a both and, not either or. I think that uh, the tension of why we exist as a church is to extend the gospel, to make disciples of all the nations. That actually means reaching more people.
Right.
Jesus called his 12 disciples to go and spread out and plant churches. I mean, think about the early church, right? Acts chapter 2. The early church started with 3,000 people baptized. So by American standards, that's a mega church. And so the church exploded, but then they didn't just stay in Jerusalem, right? They went and they continued to spread the gospel. And there's a lot of people who mistakenly teach that, the house church model is the biblical model, right? Because they only met in homes. Well, biblically, they met in homes and in the temple. It's in Acts chapter 2, it's Acts chapter 4. So there's a lot of extremism today that pushes back on the bigger is better. And so the early church met in those different environments. So I think every church's desire is to see more people come to Christ because our world is desperately lost without Jesus. But we should also have an equal desire to help those people grow and mature and learn how they too can go out and make disciples. What are your thoughts, Jay? And I'm kind of just
No, I think this is.
continuing.
Listen, I'm just letting you kind of run with it. I love the passion there because I think everything you said is absolutely accurate. When we think about this tension that's there, because there is a tension, and depending on where you stand, is you probably the camp that you'll fall in on that, right? And I know this is kind of even tackled. This is a something we all struggle with in church planting world, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I think this is why pastors and leaders struggle a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, if we're this is why it rubs us wrong, is because in the church planting world, deep down, I know a lot of planners really do care about making disciples, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's that struggle of like, well, we can only do so much, or limited because we're not as big, or whatever uh, that may mean, right? So not being big, because bigger often comes with bigger challenges, and so we're like not ready for those, as the way we're set up as a church and things of that sort. And so this is just a big tension point, because everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to grow,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so much work that has to be done to lay the foundation, right? The groundwork in order to sustain growth. And so, so many people, I know so many leaders who run to the growth and say, hey, go back to the question you asked earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's this idea of we should just fill the seats, right? Build it and they will come, the Field of Dreams motto,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But the problem we find most often is when we build it and they come, are we really ready for them to come?
Mm.
Are we set up to where we can actually do what we've been called to do, which is make disciples who then make disciples?
That's right.
If we haven't done the work on the front end to lay the groundwork to make disciples,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be hard to reproduce. We're going to reproduce what we're getting. So it will always become that come and see versus go and tell concept. And so that's where the tension lies, is we know the benefits that come with more people in the seats and more people attending and more people engaging. But if we run after that, we miss the foundational work. It can be a scary place.
Yeah, I agree, man, because you can go down those different ways and it becomes really unhealthy long term if the goal is just to get butts and seats, and not the goal to see them fully transformed and connected and growing. So it's a both and I think, I remember when I was a part of launching the North Campus in Jacksonville, and just we started with a small group of 30, and so there's a desperation of, hey, we've got to go out and interact with neighbors. We're going to go to the ball fields. Like, we're inviting everybody to church because it's just us. And if we don't receive enough people to build this church together, we're not going to be able to make a big impact beyond these next few years. And so there's a little different desperation, like you were saying, than a church maybe that's established, that has, very a lot of structure and financial support. And so for all the church planners out there, hang in there, know that you're not alone. But really, it's like, when it comes to worrying about, am I like this church down the street, or am I like this church I see online, comparison creates this insecurity
Mm.
in all of us as leaders, when we really should be looking at God. How have you made me to make the biggest impact for your kingdom? And God has a different journey for all of us. So whether your church is a certain amount of, 300 or 3,000 or 200 or 100, the goal is, how can I use my gifts, my abilities in the greatest way to reach people, make disciples? And then you go to bed and sleep well at night because you've done all you can in your power, but you've rested in the fact that God's the one that brings the change. God's the one that brings the growth. But I'll tell you, that's a tension. I don't
Oh,
always do that well.
listen, it's a struggle with this whole idea of comparison, and looking and seeing what's out there. And unfortunately, now you can just you can go online, you can see any church you want. And it can be difficult. It can be difficult. And I think you said something a minute ago that was just worth kind of re-emphasizing, this aspect of be comfortable and okay with who God created you to be as a leader, and trusting the process that God put you where you are at this specific
Mm-hmm.
time, with this specific people in this specific context, in order to ultimately fulfill his specific vision for you, right? In that
Mm-hmm.
ministry, right? And I think that's huge. I think it's huge to really come to wraps with that. I was sharing with you before we even kind of hit record today, about how I'm in that process working with a real good friend of mine, a friend of both of ours, and he was sharing with me and showing me, really it's a good time for you to be honest with who you are. And I was sharing with you some of the tests I've been taking and things like that, and really
Mm-hmm.
revealing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I affirm that, but I have to own that. And so I'm not going to do some things that other people do really well.
That's right.
And I know
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
And I have to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm different than you, Josh, and you're different than me. You
Mm-hmm.
have gifts and qualities and things that God uniquely put you together, and how he knit you. I love that. Knit you in your mother's womb. He knit you and put you together to be unique, just like you are today.
I'm very unique, very awkward.
Right. But own that. Own that. And own the awkward. Listen, I know I'm awkward. My wife tells me all the time. She's like, Jay, I, come on. right? And so I have to own that. And I
Hmm.
think owning
Hmm.
that and being good with who you
Yeah.
are, because I think on the flip side, when we start answering this question, is bigger always better? Uh, Most of the time, what drives us to
Hmm.
unhealthy patterns in life
Hmm.
is what you're just talking about, this comparison game. It's
Yeah.
unhealthy because we're trying to be somebody we're not,
Right.
or
Yeah.
even it's not the right time for that.
Right.
You know,
And
the
I think
person.
knowing who you are, like you're saying, I agree so much. Learning how God has created you to make the biggest impact, not just for the kingdom, but where you can learn to be at peace with the way He's wired you, but always seek to grow, right? Seek to become
Mhm.
a better, more godly husband and a spouse and dad and pastor or leader. But it's a tension because our world that we're in teaches you the way up. It's always got to be up and to the right. You've got to be bigger than you were last year. You got, of course, 2020 took care of that with church leaders. All the 2020 vision, we had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, this is a new, this is a new dynamic. This is a new uh, deal. How do we impact people with the Lord in a creative way? Even right now, our church is in what we call it the Ford Initiative, where we are in a 2-year generosity campaign to raise money for our first campus. All right, the Bridge Church is a portable church, but 20 years old. We'll be 21 in February, and we've been in 16 locations in those all those years. And so,
That's a
so
lot
now,
of chairs set up.
right, lots of chairs. I mean, pipe
20
and drape.
years.
Right, pipe and drape will not be in heaven. I think
Right.
it's not in the Bible, but
Yeah.
I just really feel strongly about that.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. So we are in this season, right? And we met with elders this last week. We're meeting with our team and we're dreaming together, but we're looking at the finances. And of course, this is the most expensive time to build anything in the history of mankind, apparently. And so, but we're trusting God in that. Like, how many seats should it be? How many seats are we filling now? How big do we build the building? Well, we want to build too small and then we run out of seats, but then you don't want to build too big and then you have no money to do ministry and then you're considered quote unquote house poor. And I've been around that where churches overbuild or they're in so much debt that the leaders don't sleep at night, and every week they're praying that enough money comes in to cover all these bills. And so, but what about the vision? Don't you have big vision? And so God is really teaching me through this season that ultimately a building isn't the goal. As God leads here at our church, if we build this first campus, the goal isn't building the campus. It's just a tool. I mean, it's just a place to use to reach and disciple people. And so I've been trying to emphasize that in my own life and to our church, that when we arrive at that place, whatever God decides to do, right? That's not the goal. The goal is going, okay, where's that next church we can support? Who's that next missionary we can send? This place isn't the goal. My platform isn't the goal, right?
Hmm.
It's ultimately a tool to use to make disciples and just reach people. So that's something we're learning during this crazy COVID 2021
Well, yeah, and
year, right?
COVID did cause us all to go back to the drawing board, but now I'm beginning to even see even some of the circles I'm in. There's even now again the comparison game. Like, okay, now there's even more. It's not about what you were doing on the weekend, and now it's okay. What are you doing online? What's your online look like? How
Right.
many are you engaging with online? Now there's this comparison game that's kind of playing coming out now of like now there's even more to keep up with, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's always going to be there. We just have to learn how to navigate it.
That's right.
It's always going to be there. It's a temptation of mankind, unfortunately, is we're always comparing ourselves to others. We should be stirring one another, spurring
Mm-hmm.
one another, right? We should be
Yep.
sharpening one another, encouraging one another, but it shouldn't be in a negative sense of like I should feel horrible if I can't reach where you're reaching now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's right.
and I think it would be unwise of us not to really kind of tackle and look at the idea of what did what is Jesus like? If we go to Scripture here and look at this aspect of is bigger always better,
Mm-hmm.
what does Jesus actually say about this? What did he have to say about the concept of comparison or bigger
Yeah.
is always better?
Well, you look at his heart, right? Jesus, of course, for God so loved the world. So if you were to say bigger is better, God's heart is bigger than
Right.
than anything we could ever imagine, right? That he came to provide a way back to God. And we serve a God that's big, but a God that's also close to us and intimate, our best friend, and that cares about our need. Um, but where it gets really icky and where it gets really unhealthy is when we start building our kingdom, and God's really clear. He resists the proud, right? But gives grace to the humble. And so in my life, I'm continually saying, Lord, help me to never get in the way of what you want to do in my life. And that's happened many times, and God has humbled me. But I would say these two words: having a humble confidence in what God can do, to give him all the glory for whatever he wants to do, but ultimately knowing that it's not about me, it's not about what I bring to the table, but ultimately it's his kingdom to be brought forth. And I think a great example of that is John the Baptist, right? I'm preparing a sermon this week to kind of talk about him, but John the Baptist, I mean, he had incredible following. He was the cousin of Jesus. I mean, this guy was captivating, right? I mean, if you go study his life, he was bold, he was exciting, he ate locusts and honey, he wore crazy clothes. I mean, this guy was attracting multitudes to leave Jerusalem and come out into the wilderness to hear him preach. So this guy must have been an incredible leader, and but instead of using that for his own glory, what did he say? He said, I must decrease, he must increase. He even said, I'm not worthy to untie his sandals. So I think in John the Baptist, we see just a model of someone that's bold, that dreams big, but ultimately the goal is to point to Jesus. And I think that's something God is trying to teach me in this season. And Jesus said he was the greatest who ever lived. In Matthew chapter 11, he literally said the greatest who's ever lived was John the Baptist. And he modeled a life that continually pointed people to Christ, even when he could have said, no, follow me. Follow, because they were saying, aren't you the Messiah? I mean, you're awesome. You look what you're doing. And he continually deflected the praise from himself to Jesus. He said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. What an incredible picture of what we should be as leaders and what I hope to grow into in my life.
Yeah, I exactly. I don't know if I can add much more to it. That's exactly. I think Jesus' heart is for more. He wants us to reach
Yeah.
those that are far from Him, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, there's humility that must come in that. That it's not about us. It definitely is about Him. And in
Yeah.
all the heroes that we looked at, we can look at through Scripture. That's the same concept. You think about Paul, and Paul was continually pointing to Christ, right? Even though people were, wanting to follow him and to really, raise him up, he was always deflecting. I like that idea of deflecting, right? To
Mm-hmm.
who Jesus is and what Jesus accomplished, because really we accomplish nothing outside of Him, and we know that, and we have to trust that, and we often have to remind ourselves of
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a professor in college. You might have had him, and he was super super intentional about the aspect of deflecting and making sure that no one gave
Yeah.
him any kind of praise. He would even
Yeah. I remember
acknowledge
that.
you if you know what professor I'm talking about. He even was
Yes.
like, please, I would ask that you don't, pray for me as I'm. It was
Yeah.
almost as like I was like I could not believe it at first. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
heart behind it was like, hey,
The heart was good.
I really want to deflect.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
many Bible college students were like, I don't get it. I don't get that. But
Yeah.
I
I,
think his
I think
heart
there's a
was
there's a healthy way to receive encouragement and say thank you for encouraging me, but not let it go to our heads.
right.
Like I was at the baseball field. I'm helping coach my son's little league team, and encouraging one of the guys to come to church, and just praying for him. And he said, "So are you like so you're a pastor?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you like the guy?" I'm like, "I don't know what you mean." He's like, "No, like, are you like the lead guy?" And I'm like, I preach a lot, and I'm, I guess you could say I'm the lead pastor, the lead teaching. He goes, oh. I said, but dude, here's the thing, man. We have a lot of great pastors. I said, I just point to the guy. I'm not the guy. I point to the guy. He's like,
Right.
oh, I get it. But for him, it's like, are because there's that weird, that weird view of a pastor. Like, oh, are you the guy? It's like, well, I'm just a pastor that's pointing to the guy. So
I
it's
think
like, it's like, why is this so awkward? Why do we in American churches make this so weird? Why do we treat pastors like, oh, whether you're an associate, lead, teaching pastor, small group, why do we treat it so weird? Why can't we honor each other and not make it about there's just this one guy on the top of the ladder and he's the only one that can give vision. He's the only one that can share anything exciting and inspiring. It really bugs me that
Mm.
we've created this culture that the guy at the top of the ladder, is the only one that can really speak for the Lord. And I just think it's unhealthy. This isn't part of this podcast episode. Maybe that's a whole nother one,
I mean, yeah, I was just gonna.
but I mean, like, here's the thing, man.
I was
We
gonna ask
need to
you. Tell us what
become,
you really think. Tell us what
yeah,
you really
tell me,
think.
yeah, it's bigger, always better. Like at the end of the day, every pastor's temporary. Every pastor is at a place for a certain season. It might be 30, 40 years at one place, or it might be less, whatever. But to know that success and your effectiveness is not in your title, but what did Jesus say? Well done, good and faithful servant. We can't ever lose that fact that my greatest impact would be how I serve others, not how I'm served. So that's just a sidebar. That's extra for today.
Hey, I like the bonus. That's a bonus right there. I think it's good. You never know when it's going to come out. Thanks for sharing that, though. I think there's something there, and with going into the month of October, which is traditionally in many areas the pastor appreciation month. I know
Mm-hmm.
we've had some conversations about where we're taking the podcast in the month of October. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be good. I think pastors are going to be encouraged by spending some time. And
Mm-hmm.
I even think people who are not pastors will be encouraged on understanding. Maybe if we can pull back the curtain a little bit about what
Mm-hmm.
pastors really, you just did. You pulled back that curtain
Yeah,
about
I'm just
why do
saying this.
people make
Yeah,
it weird?
like why is this weird? Because you know we're called to just be servants of the Lord, and it's not about it. It's not about us getting special accolades. Like and we've just created that. I don't think anybody's meant to create that, but and it's the bigger always better. It's you're at that's where you're at. Oh, you've gotten to that place. I remember back in youth pastor days. When are you going to become a real pastor? And I would usually tell the older ladies, I don't think I ever will be. Because like in their mind, I wasn't a real pastor until I was in this certain position, and I think they meant well, and I always appreciated their encouragement. But it's growing in that heartbeat of saying it's not ultimately about self. And we live in a culture that promotes self. It's always about how do I get my name out there? How do I build my platform? And at the end of the day, if I'm building Josh's platform or Jay's platform, that's a dead end road, because at the end of that is self, and it doesn't help anybody. And so I think with churches, we've got to always ask the question, if the goal is just bigger, if it's just bigger buildings, bigger staff, bigger budgets, and that's the goal, and we're not leading people closer to Jesus and making disciples that make disciples, then what are we doing? Why are we doing all of this?
Right. That's good. So I guess we need to answer the question that is for today is bigger always better? So we've talked about a lot. We've talked about what Jesus says. We've talked about what we think, why we think leaders struggle from our perspective, but is
Yeah.
bigger always better? Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I've heard it said, I don't know who said it, but they said that better is better and healthy is better. I love the idea of excellence. Excellence is doing the best you can with what you have. Perfection is the dark side of excellence. One of my mentors always taught that. And so what it might mean, it's applying that principle to whatever context you're in, whether you're a church planner in a school, whether you're at an established church, or maybe you're at a business or whatever. God has called all of us to make much of him, regardless of our facility or our resources, because at the end of the day, we serve a big God who wants to do big things through faithful people, but it might not be the big things that the world would define as big. I believe we're going to be surprised in heaven over who receives rewards. You might think the well-known, popular, whoever is going to be the one racking up all the crowns and those heavenly rewards, when we might meet some people that are just not even known in this side of eternity, that Jesus is going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. And so I think there's nothing wrong with a small, medium, large church, but I think there's something wrong with a small vision. I think we can all agree on that, because we serve a big God. Ephesians 3:20, right? He can do immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine or think, through his mighty power at work within us. So how about you, Jay?
Well, I think if my church here in Boston, Milestone, hears me say Ephesians 3:20 again, that's we live there going, hey, look, we believe he can do far more than we can think or imagine. We believe that, and if we believe that he's capable of doing that, and he's a big God, then we need to not limit him in what he can do in and through
That's
us.
right. That's right.
Specifically, it starts in us. As I was processing this, and obviously we think about the topic beforehand. I wish we could get on here and just rattle and rattle and rattle, but we think about it and process it. I began to really process what it would look like, and is bigger always better? And I think there are some clear indications and clear indicators that we need to be mindful of when we're thinking about our motives behind things, and why we're doing what we're doing. And I'll give you a handful here. What I'm thinking, it may be unhealthy to be bigger if it's no longer something that you can manage, right? It's not something you can manage anymore. You've only gone after the butts in the seats, and now you have 200 people, and you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with this. And there's no plan. There was no hard work done beforehand. You just went out of gathering people. I know pastors that have told me in transparency, they've said, hey, I can. There's a great temptation for me to lean into my personality. I have attractive personality. People want to be around me, and I want to be around those pastors. And if they're not careful, they can attract a large crowd, but they're not really doing anything with it, because they're it's not manageable. They can't manage it. They don't know how. They're not prepared for it, right? And so if it's not manageable, it may not be wise to continue to try to seek after something that's bigger. I think another thing is really the real motive check here is, what are you attempting to glorify yourself, or are you attempting to glorify God?
Hmm.
Which one are you? What are you after here? Whose platform, as we've talked about here earlier? What platform are we
Hmm.
building? Whose platform are we building? Are we deflecting to him, or are we putting the focus on us? Are we in the spotlight, or is he in the spotlight? You've mentioned multiple times vision, right? I think another thing we need to be careful of is vision must remain in the driver's seat. What are we really about? We can't let people, programs, things like that drive what we're doing. The goal is not to put another program in place. The goal is to make disciples that make
Hmm.
disciples.
Hmm.
And then I think when you get down to it, when you begin to realize, I think we're beginning to sacrifice, quality for quantity. We want more, but it's going to mean that we can't give whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a struggle there, and I think you've been to. I, I'll even relate it to this way. You've been to a restaurant before where they've grown, they've started to blow up, but all of a sudden their food start tasting bad. You're like, I don't know if I like it anymore, you know, because it's no longer the mom and pop who's been doing it a long time. They started branching out and starting other things, and they've just the quality's gone away, and it's no longer who it used to be.
Hmm.
And so, how do you keep that quality as you add quantity? I think there's some
Hmm.
work that needs to be done in there. So that's my thought process. When
Yeah.
bigger is not always better. What
Yeah.
are
And
your
I think,
thoughts?
yeah, going with that, just the idea of, I think you said it, just the idea of structuring for growth. Like, if I really believe that if God is sending the people to grow a church bigger, right, with more people that need Jesus, I really do think in a lot of ways, God is going to send the people to the church that is structuring for that, preparing leaders that has a not only the vision to reach people, but they're saying, hey, how are we going to care for folks when they come in? How are we going to care for people that are coming out of addictions and brokenness? Are we just going to just expect them to sit in a row and not get in a circle? You know, how are we going to equip people to serve? Just echoing what you're saying, I do think that when we are actively saying, God, help us to manage the people that you bring us with excellence and with love and care, um, I think that really goes into it. But when we, like you're saying, you're not doing with excellence. You're not thinking about the quality of that. I really think that's where you can grow bigger. Or you can do big things, but what kind of impact do you have in their life spiritually and beyond those people that come in, for them to be able to go out and reach people as well? So
Right. The goal is not just to entertain people for a couple hours a week. It's to really make disciples, as we said.
yeah.
But this is not all bad at the same time. I think there is some indicators that bigger may be better at times. So I think the word always might be the key here. Is
Hmm.
like sometimes bigger is better. That's where we should be moving towards. And I think there are some indicators where you go, okay, maybe it is time for us to move forward. Maybe it is time for us to expand. And I think there's some indicators there. I think one is that you now have something that is manageable and scalable, right? Your goal should be to produce something that can be reproduced. This is
Mm-hmm.
disciple making, right? Go and make disciples. Uh, some of the best disciples you can make are the ones that are reproducing what you've been taught and invested in you.
Mm-hmm.
Teach them all that I've commanded you, is what Jesus said. So therefore, now you're reproducing something that Jesus established, right? So
Mm-hmm.
manageable and scalable. I think the idea of keeping it focused on God, as you said with John the Baptist and the illustrations you used, of if we are continually pointing to Jesus, pointing to who he is and what he's done, it's going to bring people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was mentioning earlier, a ministry coach, and I love, he said something to me. He said, when we're making decisions in life, this was just so, I think this was gold. I think more people need to hear about this. This guy, he said, when you're making decisions of what you're doing, you should actually take the path of greatest surrender. So it hit me. So taking the path of greatest surrender. And again, you might go, well, doesn't God care about, where I'm at? Doesn't he care about what I'm going through? Doesn't he care about my family? Doesn't he care about finances? Doesn't he care about all those things? And he does. But if you choose the path of greatest surrender, what that means is he's God is priority and God is number one. And what we know is when we do that, God takes care of those other details. He takes
That's
care
right.
of the family. He takes care of you. He takes care of your circumstances. He guides you through it all because you surrendered to him. And so if our decisions are based in our greatest, the path of greatest surrender, it's this idea of like, what's going to challenge me to surrender more to God?
Mm-hmm.
And through that, God is going to multiply. And that's where we come back to like bigger. Yeah, God's going to do something great with that
Yep.
because of the sacrifices that you have made, the surrendering you have done. Most people see a
Mm-hmm.
church that is huge, full of people. What they are not aware of is the sacrifices, the the
Mm-hmm.
the endless sacrifices that were made by numerous people, not just the guy you see on the platform or the worship leader you see on the platform, but numerous sacrifices that were made in order to be where they are today because they
Mm-hmm.
chose the path of greatest surrender. And I think that's what you see a lot of times taking place that nobody recognizes. So keeping that focus on God, and when you do that, you may be surprised at what happens, right? When bigger
Mm-hmm.
things get bigger and things continue to grow because God is
Mm-hmm.
in control. And then the last thing comes back to that idea of vision, knowing where you're going and why. I think the biggest
Mm-hmm.
question is why. Why are you going where you're going?
Yes.
You
Yes.
mentioned it in your building. You talking about the building thing that you guys were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's not about the building, right? We're going to be okay
Mm-hmm.
with whatever happens there. We
Mm-hmm.
know where we're going. We're wanting to
Mm-hmm.
make disciples, and God's going to take care of those details, and we're going to be good, and we're going to do the best we can with what we have. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where it really lands. And so when you do those things, you may recognize that, hey, we're going to get bigger. Things are going to grow. And that's not a bad thing. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
want people to misunderstand the fact that we're saying bigger is not better.
Mm-hmm.
There's times when it's not better because it's
Yep.
not healthy,
Mm-hmm.
but there are times when, hey, God's doing something. As
Yeah.
Henry Blackerby says in Experiencing God, find out where
Yeah.
God's at work and join him.
Absolutely. That's such good. That's such good wisdom. I do think an unhealthy church that finds a way to attract more people just becomes a bigger unhealthy church. Um,
Right.
and so we, especially in American churches, we value big, big, big. And so um, I would just echo uh, seeking to grow in a healthy way for the glory of God. And we should always pray big prayers
Mm,
because we pray to a big God who has a big heart for a lost world. So our prayer life, our leadership style should always be who's, that person that's not there yet, and always focusing our people not inward but outward, because that's healthy. Jesus did not come for those that don't think they need a doctor, but those that are sick. And so human nature is to cocoon ourselves and hang out with our besties and not go out. And so part of leadership, part of discipleship, following Jesus is continually learning that it's not about me, it's about others. And so I know in my life, I'm learning this. I have a long way to go, but God has called us to have a big vision, but it's going to look different for all of us. I mean, there are people around the world that are pouring out the gospel in areas where they're never going to be seen or heard, probably, but they're making an impact for the kingdom. And so God has a calling for each of us. It all looks different, and we got to stop comparing and start encouraging each other.
Yeah, listen, God needs those that are going to reach 5, those that are going to reach 10, those that are going to reach 50, 100. God's using all of those people.
Yeah.
It's not about what you, it, yeah. So stop, like you said, comparing and start encouraging. I like that. I think
Yeah.
it's a
Like,
great note.
that's why I avoid a lot of pastor meetings unless it's actually getting together like this and talking about our lives. Cause usually you show up and they say, so how many you got? And I'm like, what do you mean? How many you got? I don't know what you mean. I usually dance around it. How many people go to your church? And I always say, not enough,
Ooh, get them,
because there's more people that need Jesus.
get them.
And so that usually stops the whole conversation. And then we actually talk about our lives.
There you go. There you go. Josh, I think this has been fun, and I think it's been good. I've been encouraged through this process of
Yeah,
talking about
I
this.
always enjoy hanging out with you. And if you've been listening to the pod and you have some questions about anything, church, leadership, once you send it to the pastorpod@gmail.com. You can also follow along on Spotify, or we're on Apple podcast now.
There
So
you go.
that's an exciting. Took us a little while to get there. They finally let us in,
Apple
and
is
so
a beast.
yeah, so we're in, man. I guess we're official now. But if you've been encouraged by the podcast, let us know if there's anything you'd like us to discuss. We're going to be bringing on some awesome guests here in the next couple of weeks, so be on the lookout for that. And but we're glad you're joining us.
Yeah, and again, we're here every single week with new content, new exciting things to discuss and talk. And really, we hope this is an encouragement to each and every person that's listening. And Josh, I guess until next time, we'll see you soon, man.
Yeah, see you guys next time.